So I finally got my hands on the Canon R5C, Canon's cinema revamp of the ever-popular R5, hence the C. For the longest time, honestly as long as mirrorless and DSLR cameras have been around, they've always been categorized as photography cameras with video capability. But finally, Canon has flipped the script. As a longtime owner and part-time hater of the R6, the R5C is a very welcomed update that makes me tempted to make the full switch. But is this slightly fresher, bolder, lumpier version of the R5 really worth the upgrade from its counterparts? I mean, it is Netflix approved, so Canon's gotta be doing something right? Now to go over some simple specs, this is a 45 megapixel camera with video recording rates up to 8K RAW. And of course, it's an RF lens mount like its counterparts. The C and the R5C came to fruition after numerous complaints and issues about the original R5 and R6 having difficulties with long-form video. One, because of their recording limits, and two, the issue that every YouTuber, including myself, has beaten into submission: overheating. And problem number two was solved very easily by the addition of the fan on the back, similar to what you would see in a typical Canon C series camera. It's not common to see this addition added to a mirrorless size camera, but it's absolutely essential to solve a vital problem that these cameras have had. My whole time handling this camera, I haven't had any issues with overheating and it functions just great, which really shouldn't be too much to ask for in a camera in this decade. So for problem number one, it's not atypical to run into frustrating recording limits with cameras of this size. That's why filmmakers and videographers often opt for those larger cinema cameras for longer form content. But the R5C adopts those same recording settings as those larger form cameras. But it does come with a bit of a caveat. More on that later. Size-wise, it's very similar to the other R series cameras, but obviously it sticks out just slightly in the back because of the fan, which can be a little bit odd when using the viewfinder. But what I do love is that they opted to stick the viewfinder out a little bit more than the other models to compensate for that. Thank you, Canon. You did something right for a change. Not to mention, and it's not a really huge thing, but I personally find it very satisfying that the menus and the user interface mirrors what you typically would see on a cinema camera. Don't get me wrong, the simplicity and the consistency of the typical Canon mirrorless user interface, it's really good and easy, but it doesn't quite feel as professional as what you get in this camera. It's a small gesture, but it's something I personally appreciate. Plus, anyways, if you do switch back over to photo mode, it goes back to the traditional Canon mirrorless UI setup. However, if you are frequently switching between video and photo, don't expect this camera to switch instantly. It takes about 5 to 10 seconds for it to switch over modes. That's something I didn't know when I was out shooting with this. And when the birds came overhead and I wanted to film them, it was too late to film the birds. You gotta film the birds. Some more functions that are added to this camera that are really welcome addition compared to the original 5D are a lot of those small but vital cinema functions, such as zebras, waveforms, focus peaking. You don't realize how much I love focus peaking. I also like the addition of shutter angle versus shutter speed. This makes it effortless to dial in the correct shutter value when you're switching frame rates. Again, good thing, Canon. Nice job. Plus, an added bonus and a little touch that I love is now that you solely record from the shutter button instead of the tiny little red record button from before, which funny enough actually took me a minute to get used to. It feels like I'm working with a shrunken down version of the C100-200 series. Actually, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when everyone was downloading Magic Lantern onto their cameras in order to hack it to get raw video and all of those extra cinema settings on it, and then you voided your warranty because you did that. Good times. Good times. I mean, to have all of those amazing features here on a mirrorless camera size, what more can you ask for? It's like Canon hit a home run here, right? In theory, yes. This is honestly a really, really nice camera and a concept I've been looking for a long time. But there are a few quirks that prevent this camera from being absolutely perfect. First of all are some head-scratching omissions from this model, which include IBIS stabilization, which is not a huge deal if you're primarily shooting on gimbals or tripods, but can be an issue if you're shooting handheld. Also, due to a different operating system when it shoots video, it tends to drain battery really quickly, much quicker than its earlier counterpart, which is a very frustrating drawback to the improved recording time. I was shocked to see that my fully charged battery was only going to last 30 minutes on this camera in video mode. Wasn't that the whole point of this camera? That you could record for over 30 minutes at one time? How are you supposed to do that when the battery dies after 30 minutes? Explain this to me, Canon. Frustratingly, it forces filmmakers to purchase external battery options. I also would have maybe loved to seen built-in ND filters into a camera like this, but guess you can't have everything. Now, one of this camera's headline features is that it records in 8K RAW, 60 frames per second. Only problem is the 60 frames per second in 8K is only doable with an external power source. And to be honest, while the 8K is very sexy and appealing, it's probably not the format you're going to be using the majority with this camera. Most of the time, you're going to be shooting in 4K, especially with the extended frame rate up to 120 frames per second. And if you're using this camera for HD, you may want to reevaluate your life choices.
Stop it. Get some help.
Another thing that you do need to keep in mind is that SD cards will only take you so far with this camera. Any recording format higher than 4K H.265 is going to require a CF Express card, and those, as you can guess, do not come cheap. This is the same deal as the original R5, and it's not unfamiliar with people that use these larger cinema cameras, but for people used to getting by with SD cards on small mirrorless cameras, this might be a bit of a rude awakening for you. I mean, luckily what you can record on there is super great and beautiful, but if you're using this for any type of substantial shoot, like, I don't know, Netflix, you're going to have to shell out to make that happen. So the big question, and honestly the question that matters most, is if the quality of this camera's output is better than its counterparts. For the photography side, technically speaking, no. It's a 45 megapixel sensor like the R5 itself and boosts virtually the same output as it, which is a very impressive output, no doubt. But for that, it's virtually the same camera. Except technically, this doesn't have IBIS and the original R5 does, which is still odd. For video, it's very clear that this camera boasts the better output, 100%, with the increased recording specs and a myriad of new settings and features centered towards cinematographers. Even the C-Log itself seems more traditional and flat like most cinema cameras. You just may have to go through some roadblocks to get the most potential out of this camera. So, should you buy it? I don't know. Truth is, if you're a photographer, you are essentially getting the same output and picture as the original. The video side is phenomenal and just makes sense. I mean, that's what you're paying the extra $700 for. But keep in mind, you're probably gonna have to invest in a little extra gear to get the highest potential out of this camera. Can you achieve similar video quality out of the original R5? Of course you can. And you're going to run into a few more roadblocks. But maybe you like roadblocks. I don't know, it's your life, not mine. But with all of that considered, if you're doing any type of significant video work, this is the Canon mirrorless camera you need. If you're primarily a photographer, just go with the regular model and save money. Maybe even the R6, if you're really on a budget. For a first camera purchase, may not be the right camera for you, as there is a little bit of a learning curve, regardless if I decide to get this permanently or not. The fact that this camera even exists means that camera companies are listening and considering what videographers want. This is a camera that probably didn't exist originally, but Canon made the conscious effort to make it, and I really appreciate it. And I look forward to other cameras following suit to this one in the future. Just maybe we can work out a few of those kinks, and then we have a real solid winner on our hands. Have you gotten to use this camera? What do you think about it? Do you prefer the original? Do you prefer something else? Let me know in the comments below. If you're a big fan of gear reviews, editing tutorials, and all things filmmaking, be sure to like and subscribe as well. With that, I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone. With that, I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.